Welcome everyone. The webinar will begin shortly and will be recorded. Connect with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading on social media. On Instagram, follow the account at GLR Reading. On Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR, and on Twitter, follow the account at Reading by Third. Please use hashtag Learning Tuesdays and tag us to tweet anything you learn from today's webinar, and we will be sure to retweet. We encourage you to share your questions, reflections, and observations on social media. Once again, we would love to connect with you. So on Instagram, follow the account at GLR Reading. On Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR. And on Twitter, follow the account at Reading by Third. The webinar will begin in just a second, and it will be recorded and shared with you afterwards. Okay, once again, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sierra Sanchez, and I will be behind the scenes helping to produce this webinar. I have just a few housekeeping details before we get started. First, we would love for you to introduce yourself, so please use the chat box at the bottom of the screen to share your name, city or state, and your organization. Be sure to select panelists and attendees so that we all know who is here. All attendees are in listen-only mode, but we encourage your engagement by posting questions in the Q&A box. We will dedicate the last 20 to 30 minutes to respond to the questions you post during the discussion. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be emailed to all who registered. And we will be posting a brief on-screen evaluation during the Q&A portion and highly encourage you to respond. This helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement at the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Lastly, before we start, I would just like to call your attention to our upcoming GLR Learning Tuesdays webinars. On March 2nd at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, we will highlight the community schools movement and how it is poised to play a central role in accelerating learning and learning loss recovery. Next month's Crucible of Practice session is scheduled for March 9th at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. In this GLR Network peer-to-peer learning session, we will elevate the very impressive work of Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, and how they are building a community of readers. Lastly, on March 9th at 3 p.m., we will focus on state strategies to implement high dosage tutoring. We'll be sure to post links in the chat box for more information and registration for these upcoming learning opportunities. Joining you now is Yoli Flores, Chief Learning Officer for the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Thank you and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you, Sierra, and hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for today's GLR Learning Tuesdays webinar, Parents Eager to Address Learning Loss, Lessons from the Field. Today's session follows last week's conversation about equipping and supporting parents to lead and to succeed on behalf of their children. The Campaign for Grade Level Reading has always recognized that parents are central to helping their children achieve early school success. We deeply believe that parents are essential partners with the myriad of systems that touch the lives of their children. Early on, the campaign embraced an approach towards supporting parents' deep desires to succeed as parents. This approach speaks to engaging parents around their bold goals for their children. It speaks to supporting them in achieving those goals in all the ways that they want, and then joining parents in marking progress and celebrating success. And this commitment has never been more important than ever, as parents across the country have experienced their children's learning close up at home during this year of school closures. More than ever, parents are telling us not only that they are concerned that their children are falling behind, but that they are eager to be part of the solution to slow, stop, and reverse learning loss. Today's session, co-sponsored and co-designed by our partners at Family Engagement Lab, will illuminate what we're learning from parents about their desires to fully engage as essential partners and as co-producers of good outcomes for their children. You'll hear from practitioners and communities who will affirm that parents are eager to help their children succeed. And you'll hear from leaders who have joined in our commitment to support and help parents as they envision and achieve those bold goals for their children. To launch our conversation, I'm delighted to welcome our partner, our colleague, and a champion of this work, Ambika Kapoor, who will share opening remarks. Ambika is a program officer within Carnegie Corporation's education program, where she manages the Public Understanding portfolio. Kapoor oversees grant making aimed at engaging parents, communities, teachers, and policymakers in understanding and in demanding changes in education that ensure that all students develop the knowledge, the skills, and the dispositions they need for future success. So welcome, Ambika. I'm looking forward to hearing from you, and I'm especially looking forward to hearing from the panel.
Thank you so much, Yoli, and thanks for the kind introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm pleased to join you for the discussion on how parents are eager to address learning loss. We've been hearing a lot of that, and Yoli referred to some of the research and data that is showing how parents are really eager at this time to help their kids combat learning loss. Just a little bit of background on Carnegie and our interest in family engagement. At Carnegie Corporation, which is a national foundation, I lead a portfolio, as Yoli said, called Public Understanding and Education. Within this portfolio, we make investments and efforts to engage families and other stakeholders and as meaningful partners in supporting equitable access to high quality student learning. So key focus for us is building demand among parents for student-centered learning experiences. And we do this by strengthening the home-to-school connection for student success. We believe that when families are empowered as true partners in their children's education, students thrive, schools are stronger, and the whole community benefits. That's why we fund programs that bridge the gap between home and school. And we believe we want families to have access to the information they need to support their children's learning and for them to be able to act as effective advocates for change. And that's the reason why we partner with organizations like the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, Family Engagement Lab, who has co-designed the session today, the National PTA, the Center for Public Research and Leadership, who you will hear from all of them today, and some district representatives. And these are the real experts in supporting schools, districts, and families. I just wanted to share a little bit about what we've been seeing and learning, just to set sort of a little bit of context on what we've been hearing from our grantees. I cannot believe it's almost going to be a year next month when public schools across the country shut down indefinitely. And you know, we all embarked on the largest ever experiment in distance learning or e-learning or whatever you may call it. It's clear that this disruption has fundamentally rearranged the boundaries between home and school. It has brought attention to a concept that many of us in the field of family engagement have been lifting up for a long time. That despite over 50 years of research showing that students, especially students of color and low-income students, and schools do better when educators and families partner as a team. I'd say for that reason, we can safely say that family engagement is a matter of equity as much as education, an increasingly urgent concern, like now due to the pandemic. Just to set a little context, according to a study by McKinsey, the cumulative learning loss could be substantial for students, especially by the end of this academic year, especially in mathematics, where students on average are likely to lose 5 to 9 months of learning by the end of this school year, by end of June 2021. Students of color could be 6 to 12 months behind compared with 4 to 8 months for white students. While all students are suffering, those who came into the pandemic with the fewer academic opportunities are on track to exit with the greatest learning loss. So that's something that we have to sort of keep in mind. But getting them back on track will involve parents and caregivers as much as teachers. There are some signs that this is being taken seriously. Schools and districts across the country have been forced, or at least beginning to shift their collaborations with families from the nice to do when we have time category to the top list of concerns. So that's like a sign of hope. Teachers and families are also realizing that education cannot happen unless parents are true collaborators in their kids' education. Another reason for optimism at this moment is that families are uniquely receptive to developing stronger relationships with their schools and teachers. Another study conducted by a grantee of ours, Learning Heroes, found that parents and caregivers are determined to get more involved with their children's education, to work closely with their schools, schools and teachers. In fact, in May last year, 67% of families said that they felt more connected with their child's day-to-day education than ever before. And 70% wanted to know more about their lessons that children had missed and how their schools plan to recover all that lost ground. But this is not going to be an easy task. I'm sure you've all been hearing, reading, seeing, and experiencing all the challenges that parents have been facing as they take on an active role in their children's education. One of the another reason why I just want to sort of raise that family engagement has yet to take root across our education system is that we know that engaging family is no small feat, especially when teachers are already overworked. To connect with families and truly involve them in their children's education, teachers must cross language barriers, navigate multiple cultural norms, and overcome digital divides to meet families where they're at. So what does effective family engagement look like? Two of the most important issues we at Carnegie believe that schools could address around family engagement right now are, first, parents and caregivers need a much clearer idea of how their kids are performing. And second, I think they could be better communication channels available for parents and teachers to communicate with each other. And on that note, Family Engagement Lab is a grantee of ours and a great partner in the space that launched a program called Fast Talk, which connects teachers and families to auto-translated text messages aligned to classroom curricula. If a teacher, for example, notices a child struggling with a reading skill, they can send a parent a text in the parent's home language with tips on how to help the child master the skill at home. So on that note, I just want to, introduce to you Elizabeth Bryan, the co-founder and chief impact officer of Family Engagement Lab, who will tell you more about their work and lead our discussion today. Elizabeth will be the moderator for our discussion, and I'm going to now turn it over to Elizabeth. Looking forward to learning more from you and all the panelists about how parents and teachers might collaborate on combating learning loss. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's great to join you all for today's webinar. I'm really looking forward to diving into our topic today, but before turning things over to our panelists, I wanted to share a little about our work and some of the powerful insights we're uncovering this past year. So the organization I co-founded, Family Engagement Lab, is a national nonprofit that catalyzes equitable family engagement and student learning by bridging classroom curriculum and at-home learning. Its work builds partnerships between teachers and historically underserved families by facilitating ongoing communication and collaboration about learning. So I'd love to switch to the next slide and share a little more. So at Family Engagement Lab, we've been listening really closely to families and educators in the school communities where we work, recognizing just how critical that ongoing regular cycles of feedback and input are, especially during this unique time. So with that shift in roles and responsibilities that educators and families experienced when schools shut down, we wanted to learn more from the teachers and families we work with. So in April and May, we surveyed a sample of over 700 pre-K through 5th grade parents and almost 100 teachers. And one of the questions we asked both groups was, what information would be most helpful to parents right now? And what we found was that the answer really depended on who you asked. So based on the responses, both parents and teachers thought that ways to support a child's reading and writing would be helpful to parents. But we observed some other major differences in terms of what teachers think parents would find helpful and what parents themselves report they would find helpful. As you can see here, parents were far less likely than teachers to say that SEL support would be helpful. Another key difference between parents and teachers was that more parents responded that tips on how to check whether their child was at grade level or slipping behind would be helpful. And the largest difference we saw was in parents and teachers' value for information on how to support parental well-being. These findings suggest that despite the major hurdles that parents are facing, parents still highly value information to support their children staying on track in school. Importantly, this information also highlighted for us that there can be a mismatch between parents' expressions of needs and teachers' perceptions of parental needs, which is really critical to recognize. I'm eager to hear from our amazing panelists more about what they are learning from families, especially as it relates to families' roles in supporting children's learning this past year and moving forward. We have a series of questions for our panelists today, and then we'll be leaving time for Q&A at the end of the webinar. So let me turn now to introduce our panelists. So joining us, we have Elizabeth Chu. Liz is the Executive Director of the Columbia University Center for Public Research and Leadership and is a lecturer in law at Columbia Law School. She is an educator, social science researcher, and working mom of 3. Next, we have Claudia Medina. Claudia is program coordinator for the Alameda Unified School District and is an expert speaker on parent engagement. She has worked in the field of education for 18 years. She's a Master California PTA School Smarts trainer, certified trainer for the Toolbox SEL program, and a HeartSet education trainer. She is also a National Equity Fellow. Next, joining us, we have Jessica Lawrence. Jess is Family and Community Engagement Staff Policy Specialist at Baltimore City Public Schools. She has over 15 years of experience in organizing, policy, legislative affairs, and stakeholder engagement. She has worked with districts, schools, nonprofit organizations, as well as state and local governments to address the issues and concerns of families and communities. In her current role as Staff Policy Specialist for Family and Community Engagement, FCE, with Baltimore City Public Schools, she's responsible for overseeing the development and implementation of the board's policy and regulations for FCE at the district and school level. Also joining us today is Vidya Sundaram. Vidya is co-founder and CEO of Family Engagement Lab. Vidya has an extensive background in business leadership, technology, and program strategy, with nearly 20 years experience in the field of family engagement. Vidya is mom to 2 kids and proud to be part of a lively, multi-generational household. We also have with us Helen Westmoreland. Helen is the Director of Family Engagement at the National PTA, where she leads planning and management of the association's new Center for Family Engagement. From startup to scale, she's spent her career supporting organizations and funders to more strategically and collaboratively enable families and communities to support every child's success. So welcome to everyone here. So to get us started, I'd love for each panelist to take a minute or two to share how their school district or organization views the role of parents in accelerating student learning. So let's start with Liz.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for having me today to discuss this really important topic. So as Elizabeth already said, I am the Executive Director at CPERL, and at CPERL, we believe that advancing educational equity requires engaging those closest to implementation and impact in co-creating solutions. This means that we see families as integral to accelerating student learning. In this moment where student-school connections are extremely fragile, and there are limited instructional interactions, and families have been thrust into the day-to-day schooling at a level never seen before, we see that the instructional core has fundamentally changed from 3 parts, teacher, materials, and students, to now include a 4th, families. We see families' current placement in the instructional core as offering 2 opportunities for accelerated learning. Number 1, supporting families as they make schooling decisions and help their kids learn right now. And number 2, helping families translate the energy, emotion, insights they're getting from this fuller transparency into public schooling into local and systemic solutions that advance educational equity.
Thanks so much, Liz. I'll turn to Jess next.
Hi, thank you so much. So thanks so much for having me. At City Schools in Baltimore, one of the things that is extremely important for us when we think about how our district views the role of parents is that we see them as essential to our work to educate Baltimore's young people. We cannot do it without our families. And so our theory of action is extremely clear. When there are positive and trusting relationships and strategic collaborations aligned to our academic priorities, we have engagement that is linked to student success. So during this challenging time, one of the things that we wanted to do is to be able to make sure that that was real and authentic. And so we worked with Panorama Education to develop a distance learning survey that was distributed over the summer to our families to kind of help drive what our work would look like for this school year. Next slide. And so when we, in doing so, we wanted to make sure that we heard from all families. And so we implemented what we call Operation Pulse Check. And those were our virtual family listening tours to complement the survey. We wanted to really drill down and get a sense of how our families were doing. And when you just call families, that can just go a long way in just asking them, how are things going? What can we do to support you? What's working? What can we do to improve? What do you need from us? And so we learned a lot. This helped to drive our district's education recovery supports, which I'll share a little bit about in the next slide. And so what we learned from our families that gave us a really eye-opening source for what they needed and what they experienced. At a high level, most of our parents indicated that they did receive the support that they needed from their child's school and their teachers to support with virtual learning. And a lot of our families also shared that their child's school communicated clear expectations for distance learning. And so this was promising. However, on the other side, we learned from many of our families that they were really worried about their children's progress and social and emotional well-being. We also learned that a great deal of our families felt that their child did not make academic progress during the distance learning period. And so we took that information and we knew that we had to make some key shifts in our implementation strategies to one, build those 4 C's and continue connections, making sure that our families felt confident and connected to their schools and empowered and ready to be able to support learning in this new environment in their homes. Next slide. And so to do so, we implemented a variety of district initiatives that we're very excited and proud of. And please note that everything that I'm highlighting is driven by that data and parent and family input. To address families' concerns about their well-being and SEL for their students, we partnered with Be Strong Families to implement parent cafes. Right now across our schools, there are teams that are being trained to be able to lift up and implement those small and safe and welcoming spaces for our families to connect and learn from each other. We've targeted our work in schools to have FCE specialists at the district level, working in our lowest performing schools to provide coaching and guidance on strengthening two-way communication and building strong partnerships. We're very proud of our work with our teachers union and the local PTA and our parent advisory boards to rethink what decision-making looks like and shared ownership looks like at the school level during a time like this. And we're very proud of our collaboration with our local GLR team to make available customized family learning kits and parent tip sheets with culturally relevant literacy materials that are aligned to our district's English language arts curriculum. And so I mentioned the Panorama survey. When we think about how we're being responsive and where we see families as first in our work to educate our children. And so these are just some of the ways that our district has responded to their needs. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jess. Next, let's turn to Claudia. Can you share more about how your district views the role of parents in accelerating student learning?
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. It's a big question because we've learned a lot from the pandemic. And so aside, as Baltimore has done, aside from the regular surveys of checking in with families and students in their experiences in distance learning, SEL, and in preparation for going back to school, we are also connecting with what we call our diversity, equity, and inclusion groups throughout our school district. And that includes language affinity groups, where we garner information, aside from our PTA, usually white affluent communities that speak regularly at our board meetings. we go directly with our affinity groups by language to understand, well, what is their experience? What is their journey? We've built that capacity, and I know I will be speaking more about that as we progress in the presentation, but we've also leveraged partnerships like with Fast Talk to reach families that we would not normally reach on a regular conference call or a Zoom call, but we reach them through texting. And those texts arrive in our family's home language, which regularly the team does also some assessment surveys to see how they're doing. And because of the pandemic, I believe we are moving more towards doing the dual capacity training of school and family relationships. So we're learning and growing.
Great. Thank you, Claudia. I'll turn next to Vidya.
Thanks, Elizabeth, and it's really exciting to be participating in this this panel today. To share a little bit more about Family Engagement Lab, our view of the role of families is really grounded in our belief in authentic family-school partnership, it being critical to a child's successful learning journey. And this drives our work to bridge classroom and at-home learning to raise student outcomes. Family Engagement Lab helps students achieve their full potential by catalyzing these partnerships between these most passionate advocates for children, teachers, and family members. And so our values as an organization reflect that all families want to see their children succeed. A family is a broad term that is encompassing of individuals who love and care for children, and that linguistic diversity is an asset to student learning. That ongoing communication between teachers, families, and students is critical to relationship building and empowering parental involvement in student learning. And it's our responsibility to ensure that we acknowledge and find solutions to overcome the cultural, racial, and systemic barriers so that all students can achieve their potential.
Thanks, Vidya. We'll turn to Helen next.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you to Campaign for Grove Level Reading for having me here today. So National PTA's mission is all about family engagement. Our mission is to engage and empower families and communities to make every child's potential a reality. We are a 124-year-old organization of almost 3 million members, the majority of whom are parents and teachers, and the majority of PTAs are located in Title I schools. So we know parents are really critical in a couple ways. We know they're critical as their child's first teacher and coach and partner in supporting their child's learning. We also know they're really critical in systems change and that their voice matters, and ensuring that our education system really reflects their needs and priorities and desires for their own kids' learning. There's a lot of work to be done, obviously. National PTA is one of many organizations working in this space. And I would say our sort of new frontier of work is really focused around equity and how we ensure that when we say all families are partners or all families are decision makers, that we're really attending more intentionally to the power dynamics among families, within families in a community, so that those with some of the most stakes in the educational system really have the voice to influence it. So I'm looking forward to sharing a little more later.
Thank you so much, Helen. Wonderful. So we'll move on to the next question, which I'd love to pose to Jess and to Liz. What are parents experiencing with respect to their child's learning during the pandemic? So let's start with Jess. What are you seeing there, Jess?
So in Baltimore, you know, when I think about it, as a mom of 2 Baltimore City public school students, and just hearing from families and looking at our data, the pandemic has positioned families as first in teaching and learning. Like, families are leading this work in their homes every day. We've never seen anything like it. And as a parent and member of my own school's PTA and school family council, the conversations that we're having as parents, it looks different. We're talking more about academics and sharing stories on how we get it right and what we can do to build our own capacity. You can't talk about teaching and learning without talking about the home. And so in these challenging times, we've taken this as an opportunity to build trusting relationships as well as capacity for both our staff and families. This has pushed our office to do more. We have had to quickly get up and running strategies. And I'm glad that you mentioned the two-way communication earlier. We're looking forward to our partnership with Fast Talk to implement in our Title I schools that need the most support. This collaboration is taking place with our Office of Teaching and Learning. We meet with them regularly. We met with them before, but now we're like joined to the hip. We can't move without them because families are leading in teaching and learning. And so with that in mind, while there have been challenges, there are also wins. This is what we've been waiting for. And so we're planning as a team to make sure that, you know, when things start to look up and get back to normal, that this never stops. This never ends. And so that's why, you know, tactics like making sure you have the panorama survey are important. You know, we're just hearing from your families to make sure that their voices are driving what we do in this work every day. And so that is essentially what we think has been driving everything that we do. And when I think about what parents have experienced, I mentioned earlier that a lot of them want to know how they can help. You know, never before are we hearing from families, we need the workshops. I need to understand the curriculum more. I want to get an understanding for me what I can do when they can't get the answer. So that's what we've heard right now.
Great. Thanks so much for sharing that, Jess. What about you, Liz? What are you seeing?
A lot of what Jess is seeing, which is not surprising given that she's doing such great work. So since at CPRL, since the summer, we have been working very closely with over 200 families, educators, family support and education advocacy organizations, and other education thought leaders to focus really closely on three big questions. Number one, what does learning look like right now for families? Number two, what innovations, what new things are families trying out, whether that's small or big things that have helped families overcome the many challenges they're facing and work more effectively with their child's school and community. And looking to the rest of the spring, the summer, and beyond, what additional guidance and supports do families need that keeps them as part of this instructional core and that advances a more equitable education system. And on the next slide, you'll see that we found a number of things. First, which is not surprising, families are in incredibly different situations. And so we heard a lot of stories about the unique circumstances that each family is facing. I saw one question come up in the chat about the role of special education students, and have we been speaking with families who have children who have IEPs? And the answer is most definitely, and that is one of the many unique circumstances that families and children might have in front of them. But there are a lot of commonalities across families, and these are 5 big findings that we had when we did our December round of data analysis. So first, families feel like they are on information overload, and some of the snackable type of guidance or really quick sound bites that so many of us have been feeding to families at this point are becoming overwhelming because families want more of a coherent narrative so that they can understand how this piece of advice stacks onto this piece of advice, stacks onto this piece of advice, and that they too can get a sense of the bigger picture. The second is just providing the supervision needed in order to make sure kids are really engaged in remote learning continues to be a huge challenges for families. The third is that there's a growing concern around screen time and just finding ways to let their kids be a kid that doesn't require the use of screens. Fourth, you already touched on this, Elizabeth, but some findings around mental and emotional health and that idea of this going beyond just focusing on supporting kids with their mental and emotional health, but being aware of the mental and emotional wellness of the whole family. And lastly, stronger partnership and more consistent partnership between families and schools so that families are better able to participate in the tracking of academic progress, preventing learning loss, and helping juggle the various responsibilities that are placed on kids at any one time. And I know this last one is the topic of conversation today, so if we double click on that, you'll see in the next slide there are a few things that I thought that this group would want to hear more about. You know, yes, we heard a lot that families still want partnership helping meet their basic needs, childcare, food, housing, digital access, things like that. We heard a lot about communication. Again, families are appreciating all of the information coming at them, but it's a lot, and it needs to be streamlined, it needs to be coherent. Families need to see how one piece of information builds upon the next. The third is that families want to understand the key skills their kids are learning and receive feedback needed to target supports. One of the phenomenon that's happening in a lot of schools is that sometimes schools are providing less feedback to families because they're trying not to overwhelm families and they're trying not to overwhelm kids. And in some cases, they're dialing back feedback because of concerns around mental and emotional wellness. What we're hearing from families is that they do want feedback so that they know what's working and what's not. Fourth, families are continuing to want schools to help them provide opportunities for kids to be connected with one another, whether that's in the remote setting or in the in-person or hybrid setting. And last, something that I think that's really important here as we think to the future of authentic family-school partnerships is that families want to be a real part of problem solving. Both for their individual kid and for solving problems at the classroom and the school level and figuring out the direction that their kids' education is headed and that their community's education is headed.
Great. Thank you so much, Liz and Jess. So interesting just to hear, what are you all hearing? That those listening sessions are so important. So thank you so much. For the next question, I'd love to turn things over to Claudia and Helen. So let me pose this question to you two. What are effective approaches to connect with families to understand their experiences? So in many cases, families that are the most concerned about their child's learning are not the families that have the loudest voices. So how can school districts overcome power dynamics among families and school districts to ensure that families and students that need the most support receive it? And I'll turn to you first, Claudia. We'd love your thoughts here.
Sure, thank you. So at a district level, right, it's really honing in and looking at the concrete needs. And so we work with principals to identify children most in need, those that did not have internet access at home and or had no adult support. And teachers knew that. Teachers communicated that with principals. So we coordinated, or what we call cost coordinated services, so that we could identify the families who needed it most. So what we did is we worked with our family liaisons then to reach out to the families and ask them, well, what are you experiencing? What is going on? And many times we just didn't have internet access. And so kids could not access the learning. And so it was a collaboration of working with families, with our local foundations to address some of the basic needs and some of the digital needs and some of their existential needs. We're really working on Maslow's pyramid there. We also learned that many of them did not have the asynchronous learning supports that would create opportunities for their children to learn. So we also work with our local PTA council, and they rallied together to address those inequities and disparities and created asynchronous learning opportunities that served all students, not just the most affluent. We also created an A team, what we called is composed of our community leaders, top 5 languages we speak in our district, as Chinese, Spanish, Arabic, Vietnamese, Mongolian. In total, we speak 80 languages in Alameda. So we decided to focus on the top 5 to see a team that could translate the information, but also relay the information through social media channels like WhatsApp, WeChat, and Facebook. So that because we knew that not all families were reading emails. So we know that connecting them through an online service or a social media service will help a little more in establishing that rapport and that sharing of personal experiences that would then come back to us and give us feedback. And finally, tonight, we actually start our multilingual California State PTA School Smarts program, which is a 7-week session on how to navigate schools. And we hope that this will further the needs for connection and information for families on a more personal level, but also on a multilingual level, so that we can gain and continue to feel the pulse of the community.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that, Claudia. Really interesting to see the different strands of work there. I'll turn now to Helen. Helen, what are your thoughts here?
So I think one thing I probably underlined that's not necessarily a new thought, but just for the audience is what Claudia shared, and just to, in a community level, effective approaches to connecting with families are going beyond your surveys, right? Like, so it's really finding out how to build relationships, how to really empathize and understand the experiences of families. We found that too. National PTA partnered with the American Federation of Teachers this summer to understand what family and teacher engagement sort of was looking like in broader sort of decision making around reopening, and do we or don't we, and how, and what do families need, and what are they worried about. And one of the resounding findings from both of those was it really didn't feel good to just get a survey once. And families really wanted to be engaged in that problem solving that Liz mentioned in a much deeper way. What I will say is a caveat to that, and a couple of our PTAs have played this role, I know in Montgomery County they did, is it's really important that we have a lot of community-based organizations on the phone. That accountability is an important role that you play in, as districts, as school staff are listening to families, really asking the question of which families and who are you listening to. So our PTA here advocated for disaggregating all of that survey data by zip code and demographic to understand whether the response weight was actually representative of the community, right? And it was not. And so there was additional work that then had to be done in order to engage those families. So I know Yoli will pop in the chat, but we actually did provide in that report with AFT some different models, including outreach emails you could use and templates you could reproduce in your own community to engage in some of that process. And then something else we've done, again, because we are a parent-led organization of primarily volunteers, is put together a listening session toolkit. So, so in your community, as you're thinking of families, and Claudia mentioned a lot of really important ways across language diversity and building multilingual communities, but thinking of, you know, who do we most need to hear from to be sure that their voices and it's part of the decision making in our community. So that's another one. And then we've been sort of trying to synthesize some of what we've been hearing from some of the great people and organizations, like my incredible group of panelists here on the phone. One of them that really stands out to me is Dr. Tyresha Batchelor, who's a principal in Connecticut. And she talked about just all the ways that they were engaging their families to understand their needs and really reorganizing their school, the way they staff their school, the way they think about time in their school, to be sure that they were listening to families and meeting their needs. We interviewed her as part of our podcast, Notes from the Backpack. Ralph Smith from the Campaign for Grade Level Reading did a great episode with us, and I think some other folks who are probably attending here. So we encourage you to check that out as well.
Great. Thanks so much, Helen. Really interesting to see about all these different options and just thinking about diverse needs of families. For our remaining questions, I'd love to hear from the full panel. And I'd like to start with this question, which I'll pose to Vidya first. What do you hope that more schools and communities would take into consideration when making decisions about recovering from learning loss?
Thanks. I think one of the most critical things that can be done, I think, as we recover, but also, I mean, just thinking what Jess was saying earlier, like we're in a really critical moment, like we can, you know, really continue this focus on families. If more schools and communities really commit to a shift in seeing family engagement work is essential, not just to recovery, but to the ongoing supports for learning, for supporting our students' development. As so many of the panelists have shared already, like families are doing the work of educating children, and schools and communities can really play a stronger role in better equipping and empowering more families to support learning at home. And I think there's a really important recognition that, like, it's both the, you know, with the schools and communities commitment, but also resources and tools to make that possible. Our organization, Family Engagement Lab, is, as we shared earlier, support these efforts through our tool called Fast Talk. And through Fast Talk, I mean, as we shared, there's lots of opportunities that we create to make it easy and practical and feasible for teachers and families to connect around student learning. But the impact that we've created with Fast Talk is so exciting because it's not impact that we've created necessarily, it's impact that parents are creating. Parents are the ones who are creating these opportunities for their children to reinforce learning, throughout their day, and it's so important to recognize that when those relationships and those authentic partnerships are cultivated between schools and families, families can be playing that role in supporting student learning in much more directive and targeted ways that can help students overcome some of the challenges that we know are already there, and that can help support a really strong recovery. And so we hope more schools will take into consideration this incredible asset that's there, and that there's so much interest, and in all of the this has been a consistent theme and across all the panelists and respondents that parents are really invested and want to play a part in student recovery. So we really hope schools and communities really lean into that.
Thanks so much, Vidya. I'll turn to Jess next. What do you hope more the schools and communities will take into consideration when making decisions about recovering from learning loss?
I really appreciate Heather's comments about making sure that we're hearing from all families. I wanted to mention the importance of centering equity and access in this conversation as we, work to partner with families. What's unique to Baltimore is that we are a city of neighborhoods. When you get into your neighborhood, it's who you are, right? And recognizing that and making sure that we are hearing from families that aren't what we would call the traditional families. They may not be engaged in the PTA, they may not be part of the school family council, and how do we go out of our way to center their voices and to hear from them? And I think with our panorama survey and our family listening tours, we partnered with our ESOL team to target different demographics and different groups. We went in and actually did in-person outdoor focus groups with those families in partnership with school teams. We went to their community. So if I were to be really honest, it takes doing things that may be uncomfortable. If we're really valuing family voices, we had to get out with masks and bring in tables and chairs and fans and to hear from them, because they weren't going to come to us, and that was okay. So I think that those are my comments about this work. It looks different every day. We don't know what tomorrow may look like, but we have to be firm, and we have to be unwavering in elevating the voices of families and what we do to educate young people. We have to.
Thanks so much, Jess. I'll turn to Liz here. Liz, what are your thoughts?
Oh, I'll just add that with all the calls for systemic and transformational change and going to a school system after the pandemic that didn't look like the school system before the pandemic, well, I think a lot of the large-scale solutions that have been proposed are really important. Things like tutoring, additional summertime, longer school days, things like that. To me, those aren't necessarily transformational changes. They're really, really important interventions, but it's a way to provide more of the same types of supports that we already know how to provide and already are provided in so many places. And I think one crucial way to make sure that we're not going back to the education system that we know too well and that we know drives inequities is to change how decisions are made. And right now, decisions are being made in different ways because families are at the table. Schools have recognized they have to be at the table at this current moment. And I think finding out ways to keep families at the table and continue to benefit in the ways that schools have benefited from the strong partnerships between home and school, so that learning can happen across boundaries, and wherever the learning is happening, it's stronger because there is that partnership. The idea of the whole is more than a sum of the parts is really important for moving forward.
Thanks so much, Liz. I'll turn to Helen next.
So I think one of the things I really hope as schools and communities are thinking about recovering from learning loss that they keep at the center is, I think what's been said is that there is no one size fits all. All of what we collectively do is going to need to drive to touching individual kids and parents and teachers as part of that sort of trifecta that ultimately supports kids' learning and well-being. We just yesterday released a study with Learning Heroes. Edge Research and HCM Strategists did some great research on sort of just understanding the role of assessments in this coming year and where parents are thinking about that. We did find one of the top lines from that study was that 63% of parents are concerned and do feel that their child is behind compared to last year. So parents do feel this, but behind means really different things. So no matter what your community is doing, your parents are going to be the storytellers, the interpreters of your data, of your plans to know, like, is it that, my child couldn't learn because they were doing work at the table with 4 other kids going on and a lot of, right, like direct intervention and supervision? Or is it because they never actually got live instruction? Or is it because they didn't have Wi-Fi access? And it's going to be a different story for so many of your families. And so really building out your plan to understand, how do we reach each individual family and their children to understand what's going on in their home and what learning has been like for them, because parents are their child's first teacher. They know, I mean, all of our panelists have talked about, they know what's going on. They want more information. They want to help, but they don't always know how. We're also really excited to be starting a project with some funding from Carnegie. Thank you to them for that, to map some of the landscape of what all the different homeschool communication systems look like. So including Crosstalk and others. But these have really proliferated. They're great assets to reach families in ways we haven't reached them before, but they also come with some challenges, because in the proliferation of a marketplace of, like, there's 50 different ways, right? You could start using technology to better understand where families are, to better communicate with them about individual kids and hearing from them about what's going on. It can be really, really confusing. So we're elevating some of those questions in this project around how are communities making decisions about the different communication systems they're using with families, who's covered with those systems, who's not, what do families care about? And I'll give you a headline, they just want one thing. they don't want a lot of different things that they have to attend to just to know, like, do I send my kid to the bus today? Or, right, like, what do I need to ask at home tonight? Like, it's hard to manage all those different systems. So we're looking forward to putting some of that in one place. But that's the main thing I would say, is be sure that your approach to family engagement is ultimately driving towards really contextualizing and personalizing what's going on for all the different kids in your community.
Thanks so much, Helen. We'll be staying tuned for more of your information there. And I'll turn to Claudia here. Claudia, what are your thoughts?
So, something that we have learned around engagement has been that when you engage the heart, the mind will follow. We can keep on grade level and the conversations that are really, truly meaningful so that kids can feel confident to move on to their next grades, or their parents feel confident as well. But we've also seen with young children need and seek structure. Teenagers need and seek meaning. So it's going to be really important for any recovery effort that we try to make or establish, is that it's those safe bonds, the safe spaces, the human connection. And I love Theodore Roosevelt's quote that nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. It applies profoundly to our experience right now. Even as adults, all of us on this call seek that reconnection. And so it's going to be a delicate matter to consider as well, because we've all been in a state of trauma. We've all lived this for a year now. And little people, they're having social anxiety. So, it's balancing both the social aspect and the academic aspect on all levels. So it will take a lot of comfort in all of us to create that intentional space, feeling, community to recover.
Thanks so much, Claudia, and thank you all. These are really important considerations. So my next and final question for the full panel is, many of the member organizations may be wondering, what are some of the most important things that they can do to center the needs of families? So what do you all think is the most important things that communities can do to help center the needs of families? I'll start off turning things over to Jess. Jess, what do you think?
Well, thank you so much for that. I just saw something in the Q&A that kind of aligns to how I would respond to that. There was a question that how can we help our staff members who don't believe that all families care about their children's education and disrupt that thinking and work towards establishing partnerships with families? First of all, thank you for that question. And this is my response to your question, Elizabeth, as well as the participant. I think it starts with capacity building. I think that as a district, we have anchored our work more recently in making sure that our staff, every level of the organization, understands the challenge. We've got to get on the same page about the power of homeschool partnerships. One group can't be thinking, we can't be the evangelists for family engagement and the engagement office carrying, the torch. It has to be systemic and embedded deeply across the organization. Essential conditions have to be in place. And so when I answer that question, it is, you start with capacity building for all stakeholder groups. That will yield the results that we need. And if you have the capacity building, you're listening and learning from each other, you gotta meet up somewhere. So that would be my answer to that.
Thanks so much, Jess. Claudia, what are your thoughts here?
So something that I deeply believe in is equity. And so I think one of the most important lessons we have learned from the pandemic as we're reaching the final end of this so-called portal is that when we pull our resources together and we help each other, we see an impact. We can no longer be focused on an individualist focused community. We have to move towards what Saretta Hammond calls, or has worked under the Learning in the Brain book that she published, is this from individualist to collectivist culture. And so it'll be very important that we look within ourselves. And I think Jessica mentioned it, it's about capacity development, but it's a mindset around a collectivist culture. How do we include all people? How do we give parents who've proven to us over the last year that they held the fort, how do we give them the tools that they need and make them equal partners?
Thank you, Claudia. I'll turn to you, Helen, next.
I think one of the things I would say is most important for communities to do moving forward is I'm reminded of James Comer's quote that no significant learning happens without a significant relationship. And I think my fellow panelists have really illustrated what that means. I think a lot of communities are going to need to do some reckoning, quite frankly, with how much they've invested historically in building relationships with their families and what it might take to catch up if they haven't. And so that is going to mean really being intentional of, looking at the youth development organizations in your community, looking at the schools and the school staff, like down, right? Like from central office to the classroom, to the security officer who greets you at the front door, to everyone of who knows our children, who knows our families. They are the trusted messengers. And if we haven't built relationships with them, how do we ourselves build some of those relationships with our families? Because knowing them and being in relationship is part of this culture shift. I think that Claudia is mentioning we have to be in relationship with our families. And then it's not like, oh, I can't get people to respond to my survey because you're in relationship with them and right? Like, what's going on. And so I think this pandemic is really calling on all of us to think of how do we do that so we are not caught off guard when the next crisis happens? And I hate to say that, but it will. And so now is the time to really invest in building those systems to ensure that all of our kids have a strong relationship. And with those kids come their parents, and they all deserve that strong relationship.
Thank you so much, Helen. What about you, Liz? I'll turn things to you next.
Sure, I'll build on everything that's been said because I agree with it. I think in addition, to build those relationships, in addition to thinking about, as Claudia so nicely put, how to give parents the tools that they need, I think we have some real work to do to focus on capacity building for educators, and really just being explicit about the racial and cultural literacy work that needs to happen, especially given the mismatch between the racial and other type of demographics that make up our teaching force and our public school students and families. And building on what Helen said about these relationships, I think a concept that we've been thinking really deeply about and hearing a lot of families talk about is this idea of earned distrust, not earned trust, but for a lot of families, communities of color, low-income families, their schools have put them in a place where the schools have earned the distrust of the families. And so there's work to be done to take them, to a neutral place, and then work to be done to take them to a trusting relationship. And although that might sound really pessimistic, one thing I will say is we've seen so many examples of schools and communities over the past year that we've been working with that have been able to make that movement, that have really seen this as a moment for educators to say, wow, look at what we can do when we work together, and take that step back and realize the value of that partnership and start to get to know families in a really, really deep and meaningful way, and see all the values that they bring to the table and the ways that this is a group that can be stronger and support learning more effectively when everyone works together.
Thanks so much, Liz. And I'll turn to Vidya next.
Thank you. Yeah, just continuing to build too. I mean, I think that, there is a lot of work to do I would love to see more school systems and communities see family engagement and learning as a shared responsibility, but also recognizing to build those relationships to make that all possible, both among your colleagues in a system, in a community, and your partners, your community organizations, but also with families. It's messy work. It requires a lot of support, a lot of stamina, and that transition can be very difficult to sustain. And unless I think that there's that investment, there's capacity both in knowledge, but capacity and resources, funding, training, support for every stakeholder in a school system. Is Jess, is the teaching and learning staff, have they been trained on how to work in family engagement?
We're getting
Or are
there.
you doing that?
Yeah, we are. We prioritize that. We've started at every level. We have on the ground and a family and community engagement liaison that's situated in every school. And in our Title I schools, those individuals are stipend. They could be parent leaders, they're educators, they're community schools coordinators who are partnering up. So yes, we are building the capacity at the district level, because those are the folks who are implementing the strategies that impact our young people and our families. They experience what we do. So we've all got to be on the same page. It's essential to our work.
So that takes all those resources, in order to fuel this change. We have to recognize that it really takes the additional resources and to make that capacity really sustained. So I'd love to see, systems not only reimagine what can be done with family partnerships, but more systems really, but dedicate and allocate the resources so that it can actually happen. There's no other way. It takes a lot of work.
Thank you all so much for your valuable input here and contributions. I think it's time now for us to turn to the Q&A. And so for the remaining time that we have together, we'd love to open up the Q&A. We've got some questions that have come in, so I'm excited to share those with the panelists. So just a reminder to please put questions into the Q&A as opposed to the chat. So one of the questions that's come in, which I'm guessing many of you may have some great thoughts around this, is what do you see as the biggest barrier to an effective and sustainable family engagement practice? Who wants to jump in? Claudia.
I think the biggest barrier is making assumptions that administration knows what families need. And as Helen mentioned earlier, change will not happen. Well, actually, change happens at the speed of trust. And so will they show up? Will they come in? Will they engage? Well, did you co-create? How did you co-create what your offerings are so that families see themselves in the work? Unless you do that, you're really just using a checklist. It will not work. It will not be effective. You really have to engage the stakeholders.
Thanks, Claudia. Are there some other thoughts from panelists here too? Helen, I'm seeing you unmute.
Yeah, I don't want to jump on video, but I'll build on what Claudia is saying, because I think just to be a little provocative, behind assumptions is a fairly racist education system and country. And so doing family and community engagement work, and I sort of say this obvious as a white woman working in an organization that particularly in the past few decades has represented that power structure in a lot of ways. But you have those structures in your community, no matter what, whether you have a PTA, whether you don't, right? Like they are there. And so behind family and community engagement work is a set of beliefs of what do we believe of the parents of our kids. And the assumptions are part of a broader sort of set of beliefs of what we think of Black and brown children and their parents in America and kids who don't speak English and those different from us. And there is a big uphill battle, I think, to really open up that dialogue and get folks. I mean, I'm like consistently disheartened when I look at like, you know, the comments in the Washington Post or any stories in the media about family engagement, those parents this and those parents that, and it's not on accident. And so we have to sort of ask ourselves a question like, how do we change the mindset of America about our kids and our parents? And so I think that's a really critical barrier and piece of whatever strategy we have to build moving forward.
Thanks, Helen. And I'm seeing a couple of things come in the chat of barriers that participants here have seen or perceived. So would love if you have a barrier to add in the chat, we'd love for you to note some of those as well. Vidya, did you want to add something here too?
Yeah, I think there's just to add on. I think one of the challenges too sometimes is you know, just a layer on that capacity piece in school systems is that sometimes people don't think of this work of like partnering with families as their responsibility. And because of, you know, how much is already asked of and put on as responsibility on folks working in our education system, teachers, administrators, are wearing a lot of hats. And so unless there's, I think there's an explicit both you know, focus or a set of responsibilities and support, you know, to hold that responsibility. It can be a really a big challenge to overcome.
Thank you. I'll turn to one of our next questions that's come in. What are you hearing about the kind of parent supports that exist to help expand their capabilities and capacities to address all of these things that they need?
I will add that at the district level, one of the things that we've relaunched is our Family University. And we were forced to do some things differently, like removing the step of registering and just making it easily accessible to families. Why do I need to register? Just give me the content, make it short and informational. If I have barriers to adult literacy, or, you know, is it in my home language? How can I download this? Is it an app? And it required us to, you know, shift and really be responsive to the unique needs of our families, and offering content and opportunities for them to learn on their terms in multiple ways. So, you know, there's YouTube, there are tip sheets, there are printed materials at our meal sites. We had to do multiple things to be able to do that. And I'll also share, you know, in terms of like actionable ways that organizations and districts could do that are easy. In our empathy interviews, we asked families to share with us one thing that worked well, one thing that they were like really knocking out of the park at home during this challenging time. We took that data and we got together as a team and we developed content based on what they told us. Our family university offerings are based on assets that families shared with us. They have the answers. So when you talk about equity, I really appreciate you flagging that. You know, there's a lot of things that we want to change in the system and in institutions, but we've got to start somewhere. And we started with our families. Our EL families, Swahili speaking families, told us that they needed workshops on how to understand the ESOL curriculum. And so our ESOL team partnered with our engagement office and they held them. They partnered with the libraries and we responded immediately to that. Sometimes it's not like system-wide changes, but sometimes you just got to act, just got to do it. So I just wanted to offer that if you have a strategy that you're thinking, just do it. If you know it's the right thing, don't wait for anybody to tell you to do it. Just launch.
That's great advice. Thanks, Jess. Are there other thoughts from the panelists about this? We have another question that has come in, and it's about the Panorama survey. So Jess, this might be for you or others who have experience with it. But so this participant noted, she said, I truly embrace the Panorama survey as a beautiful and essential tool for helping identifying non-academic barriers that impede students from academic achievement. Did you find that the beautiful opportunity of empathy interviews to build genuine and authentic relationships that build circle of trust and finding common ground for finding solutions to challenges?
Yes, thank you for that question. One of the things that we did was we randomly selected families. And I mentioned that we have FCE liaisons, and those are, it's modeled after the U.S. Department of Education's parent liaisons, but it's a point of contact in a schoolhouse that is responsible for supporting and lifting up the work of family and community engagement. And what we did was, across our Title I schools, we gave the FCE liaisons randomized lists from families that weren't in their school community. And we shared that with families because we wanted them to tell us the truth about what we were doing and what wasn't working. And that was the first step to building trust, to have a caller in a script say, I'm not from your school community. This is a safe space. We want to learn. We really authentically want to improve. And they shared with us. So yes, to answer your question, that approach did build trust. And families were so grateful to have someone call them. They shared it with their peers. They shared it with other parents. Hey, I got a call from, city schools asking me how I was doing. We were getting calls through our customer service line where families are saying, I didn't get a call. When will I get a call? So it's something as small as calling and saying, how are you doing? Do you imagine what that means for someone, for a parent, for it to be seen in that way? And I'm stopping everything. It's not about the school board. It's not about, the vendors and the teachers union. Families, how are you doing? And so a lot of our teachers were the folks making the calls. They serve as our FCE liaisons. So it was a community-led effort to really build trust. And I think that common ground helped us do that. And I also want to add that our surveys are not just a one-off. We know that survey fatigue is a real thing, right? But we do it multiple times. We use the PASA text messaging survey to hear from families and just to check the pulse, easy, in over 80 different languages to hear from them. And we show them how we've been responsive in our practice to what we've heard from them where we can. So yes, to answer your question, yes.
That's great. Thanks, Jess. Do any of the other panelists have other thoughts in this area? I'll turn to the next question too.
I can just add, based on what Jess just shared, is that we've heard similarly from the families that we've been speaking with that they just really appreciate the opportunity to share. One of the school systems that we're currently working with that is doing really tremendous family engagement work and breaking down the barriers between teaching and learning and family engagement, both in terms of like the structural setup and in terms of like practice on the individual student, individual classroom, individual school level. They do family chats over the course of the week. And so they do what Jess just described, where teachers are just calling families at the end of each day to say, how's it going? What do you need? How's your kid doing this week? What's been your high point? Is there anything, you need help with? Those types of things, and not making it not diving right into like teaching and learning things. And the other thing that this school system has said is really, really helpful in engaging families in teaching and learning is giving families the opportunity to participate in the fun stuff that's happening in schools right now, even in the remote world. So this particular system has the way they've stacked their schedules is at the end of their day, they do things like art, tap dance, music. It's all virtual, and they've actually employed a range of Broadway actors and things like that who are out of work right now to virtually teach their students. And they've invited families to participate in those fun classes. And that has opened up families to wanting to participate in discussions around math or things where there's that anxiety can really come up for parents of, you call me and you want to talk about math, that might not be the first thing I want to talk about. But once I've done tap dancing with you virtually, I'm more open to a conversation about math. And so I thought that's something that we've been seeing right now that's really made a difference for hundreds of families in this other school system. So.
That's great. I think just speaks to that relationship building and what can happen next. Wonderful. Is there any other thoughts there? There's another question related to relationship building that I wanted to share. One of the participants notes, I had a parent tell me that he is engaged with his child's principals and superintendents who reach out to get feedback on a number of different issues. However, the relationship building is not there because he never hears from them again until they want his feedback. Should parents be informed about the relationship and what that means? How should that be explained? Do panelists have any thoughts about that?
I'll share. I think one of the things that is being flagged for me is, when we talk about how are we co-creating what family and community engagement looks like, parents should know what that means. They should be clear on it. There shouldn't be any, misunderstandings about the roles and responsibilities in areas where we work together to support student achievement. So that's the first thing. I would also suggest that, there has to be a clear feedback loop. And what I mean by that, I got the feedback. What did you do with it? And just being open and honest and transparent with families about where there can be movement, where decision making, all of those road stops. I think if we're open and honest with families in the beginning, that's with any relationship. So to answer that, I would suggest that, that school district or really make sure that they're clear in communicating with families early on. Why do I need your feedback? What's going to happen after we get it? How are we using it? What does it mean to you? And that's two-way communication. It's like baseline, two-way communication and information sharing. That's a non-negotiable for our work. I would just add that. Yeah.
Thanks, Jess.
I'll add on that too, because I think you both mentioned earlier too, some really great parent-to-parent strategies, because one of the other solutions around this is some of my parents, like, we don't know, right? Like if we're in our like little bubble trying to do our thing, like what is the experience of other parents? And that's where some of that parent-to-parent community building, like the parent cafes you talked about, the affinity groups are important, because those questions surface of like, oh, like you can just call your kid's teacher, like, oh, like I should know what happens like after these big, like feedback events, because sometimes parents just don't know, and they might not have the confidence or knowledge to know that there's an alternative to what their personal experience has been. So that parent to parent connection is also like really critical as we think of what this next phase of family engagement in the new school year looks like, because parents are such, like you said, such an asset to one another, and they have great ideas, and like they can get in a room and frequently like solve a lot of problems, or find out like these are the 3 things that like every parent in our community should get and deserves and has access to. So I would sort of elevate that too.
If I could add to that, Elizabeth, defining relationship is very important. In a city like Alameda, where we speak 80 languages, a relationship means so much and so many different things to so many people. So it's important not to make assumptions, right? It's very important to actually speak of race and culture, and how we may communicate may also be very different, right? What is it? The communication wheel. As we speak, only 7% of what we say is actually, what is understood, but it's our physical, our tone, it's energetic. And so it's very important for districts. And I think Alejandro, snap, way to go. Yes. Because some teachers may just not relate to people of color, because either they don't understand the culture, they don't understand how close they can get or how distant they could be based on that relationship. And so some cultural education would be super helpful as building capacity to understand, but even just getting people in a room, building actual relationships with people, getting to know people, to really remove some of the biases, some of the discomfort, some of the differences. Eventually you realize that everybody in the room really truly wants the same thing, is they want to feel adequate, they want to feel connected, and they want to be useful. Universal needs of all human beings are to be loved, to belong, and to feel useful. And so how are we creating those contexts? And how are we co-creating the definition of what a relationship means? And sometimes it's just having those difficult conversations, as Vidya spoke about earlier, because it's okay not to know. And so acknowledging where we're all and having a baseline would be super helpful.
Thanks, Claudia. I'm seeing too, a poll is coming up. So I just want to encourage everyone to, if they can take a moment to give that really valuable feedback for the campaign. And I'll turn to another question that's come up. Have any of you engaged other community organization partners in addressing learning loss? So with school districts not taking on all of the responsibility. Yeah, Claudia.
Yes, we've partnered with our after-school programs as they've stepped into during the pandemic to support students. So now we are having the discussions, and we will start the discussions on summer school in the coming weeks. But we're engaging them as well as our foundations because they have a different pulse, a different relationship with the community. And so learning loss, it will be very interesting and important to tackle what does it mean and how concrete, what is the concrete data that we're getting, because everybody fears it, but the reality is that in our district, it wasn't as significant as we all fear it to be. Of course, it will and did affect our people of color, our children of color, who were already started off with a disparity or a gap. an opportunity gap. So it's partnering with those that have trusted relationships already within the community and seeing how churches, community organizations, businesses, how we can all tackle learning in different means and ways. So yes, we are partnering with as many as who want to partner with us.
Thanks, Claudia. I see Jess.
I just wanted to add, thank you for that. You know, in Baltimore, as a city of neighborhoods, post Freddie Gray, we really had to tap into some of the grassroots organizations and organizers that were already on the ground and deeply embedded and had the relationship, and elevating those voices to have a direct link into communities where we just didn't have the trust. And so in doing so, right now we've implemented a community and partnership advisory board. So we have faith-based partners that come and meet with our chief of communications and engagement, like getting them that access because they are supporting our families in ways that we can't, right? And so making sure that they have access to information and they are able to align their efforts to academic priorities so that everything that we're doing is linked to student achievement. We're not doing one thing in a neighborhood, in a community, with a partner, with a church, if those folks aren't clear on what the stakes are for our young people to be successful in everything that they do, particularly in school. So I just wanted to add that. And then we have a really strong partnership with our local library. They are embedded in all of our neighborhoods. They are providing hotspots and all sorts of things and access to free literacy materials. We have a one book campaign for our middle schools that, you know, provides free access to culturally relevant literacy materials where young people can see and connect with literature that represents who they are and where they come from and what matters to them. So I would just only add that as part of, in addition to everything that you mentioned, Claudia, that we're doing here in Baltimore.
Great. Let's see there. All right. I think we have time for one last question, and it's, I think, a comment that's been posed here. The participant noted, when parents don't speak English, it can be difficult to help. They might have special need kids, and they receive a lot of therapies and help when staying online for a long time. It can be stressful. And not learning and might have behavior trouble, and socialization is zero. And teachers who have a lot of kids, it can have trouble to taking time to help each kid. And the kids don't want more time on the computer. So I think this person is just noting a lot of different challenges that can be really the reality of so many families and educators' lives right now. And wondering if any of you all have thoughts about, you know, like what could be that great touch point or, you know, way to engage, just thinking that, you know, these stressors and realities, you know, are really the experience of many families and educators right now.
Elizabeth, what we've learned is acknowledgement, acknowledge the journey, acknowledge the parent, acknowledge the teacher, because it's a reality and we can't take away the pain we've dealt and supported with webinars, community conversations with our special education community. And it's helped them a lot to bring perspective. And it's also helped a lot of parents also understand the value of teachers. I think more than ever, they have valued that work. And at the same time, the frustration is deep and real. But acknowledging has been our saving grace to some degree, like anyone, because people just sometimes want to be heard and they want to be seen because it's really hard. And so acknowledgement has just been a way of recognizing that I see you, I see what you're experiencing, listening.
Thank you, Claudia. Well, I think we've got to wrap things up. It's just been such a wonderful conversation with you all. And I wanted to turn things over to Yoli now. Just a big thank you.
Wow, well, I am just so inspired. And I hope that all of our viewers and listeners digest all of the great insight, wisdom, content, resources that you shared. I think you're starting to see in the chat how appreciative people are about this conversation. Communities throughout the Campaign for Grade Level Reading Network are making parents a big bet in their work. And so bringing this kind of conversation, this kind of learning and engagement is such a gift. And I would encourage them all, if you want follow-up, there is just so much in here that we've shared presenters' information in their bios. You'll see how you can reach them. We encourage you to do any follow-up that you think would help you and your community advance this incredibly important work. This really is the moment. And I think all of our presenters shared that. This is really the moment to think so deeply and differently about education in general and the role of parents in the lives of their children. It can be a game changer. I think we all know it and feel it. So thank you so much to all of you. I'd like to make a special thanks to the Family Engagement Lab. Our colleagues at Family Engagement Lab helped us co-design and produce this webinar. Thank you that you brought some rich content, some amazing rock star presenters. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, Helen, a frequent visitor of GLR Learning Tuesdays. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Vidya, and for moderating, Elizabeth. And then a big thank you, Liz. Thank you for the insights you brought. And of course, thank you to Ambika, who, because of her investment in this work, makes this all possible. So Ambika, if you want to say any final words as we close out, and then I'll just share the upcoming webinars for everybody.
No, I think I just want to echo everyone's thank you. This was a really great discussion. I think a lot for a lot of us to think about. So thank you. Thanks for everyone for joining too.
Thank you, Ambika. So just to close this out, I want to invite all of you to come back next Tuesday. We have a 3 o'clock session on the role of community schools in our work around learning loss recovery. And then 2 back-to-back on March 9th. We have a peer-to-peer learning conversation called Crucible of Practice at 12:30 Eastern, highlighting the amazing work of Lehigh Valley around their building the community of readers. And then in the afternoon, we'll talk about state strategies to implement high dosage tutoring. So join us, and for now, have a great rest of your day.